There is a difference between going for clarity and going for a natural sound when you learn a second language, and I want to talk a little bit more about this in this video. Good morning, guys. Good evening. Good afternoon. Welcome to your daily American English pronunciation show, Wake Up American. We're here usually between 7 to 8 a.m. New York to make sure that you can get in your 5-10 minutes of pronunciation practice with me. Hello, my name's Jeff. Rest of breath. So in the 4 keys to a natural sound include in American English, including placement, pitch, breath, trying to weaken your consonant sounds, trying to strengthen your vowel sounds. Notice that I didn't say that my goal is clear speech. If you are purely thinking about pronunciation from a standpoint of you want to be understandable when people listen to you, that's not the goal of this channel. I definitely recommend going other places because I think that going for clarity is very often the thing that's actually giving us an accent when we learn a second language. The reason is because if I go for clarity, that means I tend to overpronounce my consonant sounds. I tend to worry less about elements of contrast. I might adjust my rate of speech, how quickly I talk, all of these things that actually end up making me sound less natural when I speak in American English. Part of the reason I'm mentioning this is because for the last video I received a comment talking about how, Jeff, when you do this, you sound less clear, less understandable when you talk. Like, why would you, for instance, say a bunch of words together smiling or barely moving your mouth? Why don't you open your mouth more and things like that? And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, it's not necessary to have your mouth open to be understandable. Okay. Two, a lot of times other languages, when they're producing sounds, they tend to have those more open mouth positions, whereas it's not necessary to do that in American English. Which, number 3, if I start treating English from a sound perspective that I'm just going to take similar sounds from my first language and apply them to my second language, that's going to make it difficult for me to achieve a natural sound because the system I'm using in English maybe is the system I use in my first language. But how can that first language system still sound natural in a second language? When we're learning a second language, we want to start creating new associations. Even if there's a sound in my first language that exists in English, it's not going to have exactly the same quality. To give you an example, English has an oo sound, but maybe in your first language it sounds closer to like ooh or things like that, where it's projected higher, or the mouth might move more. In English, it's not necessary to do that. I can just say ooh, because I need a lower placement and more air coming through. If I take my first language ooh sound and say like tooth or moon or soon, that's not the same thing as in English doing like tooth, moon, or soon. So I gotta be really careful with this. I wanna make, even if there's a sound that exists in my first language, I want to make a brand new association with that sound in the second language I'm learning. The last thing I'll say is that by, for instance, minimizing some of those mouth movements, that can help me actually to achieve a more natural sound, more linking, more connection between the sounds that I create. Like, for instance, if I say a phrase like, that's not going to work. I couldn't say that's not going to work. That's not going to work with lots of exaggerated mouth movements, but I could also say that straight lips the entire time. That's not going to work. That's not going to work. And in fact, by using less movement here, yes, it's going to lose some of the clarity because the sounds are being joined together more, but that's another thing we need to think about. Your first language might be really focused on clear syllables. It might be syllable timed. It might put more emphasis on the consonant sounds instead of the vowels. But in American English, we're not focused on those things. We are stress timed, so I don't need every syllable to be super clear. We are vowel focused. I don't need heavy consonant sounds to be understood. In fact, heavier consonant sounds make me sound less understandable. So the moral of all this is to say that we can't apply standards from our first language onto our second language necessarily. Our first language might be focused on completely different aspects. And lastly, clarity, going for clarity is not necessarily the same thing as going for a natural sound. You can find native speakers that speak in a way that's very clear and understandable. However, that doesn't mean that every single native speaker is going to speak that way, and it also doesn't mean that if you find a native speaker who's less understandable, that their language is worse. It just means that maybe you're not used to the way that they're talking yet, and you need to, if you're interested in how they talk or you want to understand it better, you need to study things like reductions, like breath control, like elements of contrast, like ways to link words and syllables together. Okay. Let me know your guys' thoughts on this debate between clarity versus natural sounds. What have you discovered in your own language journeys? By the way, if you're trying to go for clarity, I always do have to give a quick shout out to Elsa. They help make these videos possible. Elsa, by the way, can really help you out if you confuse individual sounds like sit and seat or lock and luck. You know, if you have issues with vowel sounds in English, it's going to be very hard to sound natural. They have a free pronunciation test that you can take to help you identify what those weaknesses are, but then also do practice exercises that you can access for free with the link in the comments or in the description, so that way you can get started on your own pronunciation journey. I will see you guys later. Thanks for hanging with me. I know there's a lot of channels out there for pronunciation, so the fact that you are here is greatly appreciated. I'll see you all later. Take care.